Welcome to the final edition of 100% Hockey for 2025. Hockey Canada has announced the Canadian Olympic team for the 2026 Olympic Winter Games in Italy. We will discuss that thoroughly. My pal Darren Millard is off working for some reason. His day job is getting in the way of the podcast as he hosts the Golden Knights versus the Nashville Predators in Las Vegas. Our guest today, Chris Cuthbert, the man who will call the Olympic hockey for the CBC in Milan, and former Olympic assistant coach Ken Hitchcock. His thoughts on the process, who got named, and what the challenges will be between now and the games themselves. Don't forget, you can subscribe to 100% Hockey on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and all the other podcast platforms. Plus, we are now putting full shows on YouTube on a daily basis. Happy New Year, everybody. December 31st, the last day of the year. John Shannon here. Cuthbert and Hitchcock join me after this.
NHL TV is now on DAZN. Hockey lives here. Watch every game from every team. The best players in the world. And the coldest plays on ice. Watch up to 4 games at once for the ultimate NHL experience. Sign up now at DAZN.
December 31st, 2025, the final edition of 100% Hockey for the calendar year. Joined by the man who will call the Olympic Winter Games hockey, Chris Cuthbert, and former assistant coach of Canada's Olympic team, Ken Hitchcock. Boys, let me ask you first, Ken, what'd you think of the team? And how difficult was this process be for that group?
Well, I think it's difficult because you've got so many good players to choose from, but I really like the players they've added, John. I think they've added 200-foot committed guys that can play multiple positions, really competitive guys. And in each case, each guy's a little bit of a specialist. And I think the 3 guys that were added, especially up front, are terrific adds. And I think it's going to do nothing but make this team even better than they were.
Chris?
Well, we're going out with a bang, aren't we? This is one way to end the new year, and we just get excited about what's coming up in the near future. I thought there was one big surprise. We're not gonna sit here and agree on every guy that gets on any Team Canada because there's so many guys you could make a case for. I had a few in mind, but I am surprised about Sam Bennett. I'm surprised that a guy that was so key last year, especially in the Four Nations final, and then was the best player in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That gets your attention. So did I want to see the same group go? And I'm a little surprised it's the same defensive core, just because 8 guys, you think that maybe somebody else might have worked their way on the team deeper in goal, and certainly a team that is going to be the favorites heading over there. And maybe on the positive side, because that's the way I should be looking at it, Macklin Celebrini, that is one tremendous accomplishment for a 19-year-old kid to be on this team.
Well, Ken, let's talk about the Sam Bennett story, because I was a bit surprised myself, but did Sam Bennett's role, is that Tom Wilson's now?
I think it's more Suzuki and Horvat's role. I think, Bennett is a guy that gives you an edge competitively wise, but he's also a multiple position player. And I think that's what those 2 guys are. Wilson's a winger and very good winger. And he's got great hands for a big man, but Horvat, Suzuki, they get the job done in both ends of the rink. They're valuable members. They play big minutes. They play key minutes in every game. And I think those 2 guys really add a lot to the group experience-wise. And God knows in the Olympics, experience really, really matters.
I was thrilled for Bo Horvat, Chris, just because I've watched I'm one of those guys. I've been glued to the Islanders probably because of Matthew Schaefer initially, but Bo Horvat has had just an outstanding season and does so many things well.
He does, and a good face-off guy. That's one area I guess they wanted to be better at. So, yeah, multifaceted. You know, Tom Wilson, you mentioned, underrated penalty killer, too. And so there were some guys here, I think, that were named to the team because of their penalty killing acumen. And Anthony Cirelli is a leader in that regard. Mark Stone, though, too. But you mentioned Matthew Schaefer again. Man, I was cheering for him, and it's still a possibility. I mean, this team is – I mean, these guys all get to say they were named to the original team. Unfortunately, we know there's probably going to be an injury or two or maybe even more, and so that other guys may still be in the mix. And I'm wondering if Schaefer's the next guy up. We'll find out.
Anybody on the team, Ken, anybody not on the team, rather, that you thought would be on the team? Is there anybody that jumps out at you?
You know, the one guy, and that's just personal preference, the one guy to me that I would have had a long look at was Bouchard on defense. And,
wow.
and the reason for that is that, you know, in a short-term competition, everybody's keyed up and plays their best. And you're not going to get very many power plays. If you get 3 power plays, you've gone overboard. But they're going to be really important power plays, and they're going to make a difference in a lot of games. And he, to me, is a specialist that you might be able to afford to play if you get an injury now on the back end, where he comes in as a specialist. And he does everything in Edmonton. He kills penalties. He plays on the power play. He plays 5-on-5 against top players. So he does all that stuff. You know, like everybody said, he has some brain cramps sometimes, but I think he's a guy to me that to keep an eye out for in case there's an injury.
But can you afford a brain cramp in the Olympics?
I don't think those guys give you brain cramps in the Olympics. It's too short a competition. It's too intense. Everybody's got each other's attention, and I don't think you see that in the Olympics. You see it during the regular season. You see it sometimes in the World Championship, but not in the Olympics.
And Hitchy was pretty steady the last couple of years in the postseason too. And I had somebody mention to me, what happens if Makar wasn't 100% healthy in the Four Nations, and would a guy like Bouchard be the best insurance for the power play if something, you know, heaven forbid, happened to Makar? So I guess that was another reason people thought maybe Chychrun might get a look, as well as that next guy up on the power play. Who would it be, do you think, if something happened to Makar?
I think it's Schaefer. I really do. Because, and let's face it, when you're taking 8 defensemen, you're only dressing 6, right? So you're going to have 2 guys that you're going to tell, by the way, it's not going to happen very often. I mean, PK Subban played 8 minutes in Sochi. The whole game's 8 minutes. So from that perspective, you do wonder if it would even be worth their while to take a Bouchard. I was not a Bouchard guy. I've watched him play as much as you guys have. I just, in his own zone, he just scares me every once in a while. And I just wouldn't. I think that liability would not be something that this group wants. Now, from a coaching perspective, Hitch, how important would it be for this coaching staff to know all 8 of these defensemen? They had them all at some point during Four Nations, so they were introduced to them. They all didn't seem to play at the same time because of injuries and sickness. But how important was it to keep this group together because the coaching staff can understand their strengths?
Well, the first thing that comes out is it's a big group. Like, they're big, and it's a strong group defensively. It's players that really know how to play their position, and they don't make big errors. And I think that it's a group, to me, that you can interchange. They can play different places up and down your lineup. But more than anything, they're big competitive guys that really know how to play the game. And you've got continuity with Taves and Makar. You've got a lot of guys that know how to play with each other. Some of these guys have played together in the World Championships, so they know each other. And like I said before, John, I don't think the fans really understand what the Olympics are like from an experience for the players. And I know Team Canada's turned over every rock, but it's a very interesting competition. The level of play is through the roof, but the accommodations are Spartan at best. So you've got to be looking at players that can handle the time away from the rink or the downtime just as important as the competition, because the downtime and the time away from the rink really impacts your energy level. And, we had a lot of really good leaders that really stepped up in the Olympics when we were there, especially the team in 02. We had a lot of guys that really came through for us, but it's basically a twin bed, a dresser drawer, and some coat hangers, and that's what you live and sleep in. And you've got to be comfortable doing that. So this is a mature group they brought in for the right reasons, and I think that's why they're going to be effective.
You mean it's not the Ritz-Carlton?
No, it's a 1-star, not a 4-star or a 5-star. It's a 1.
That's why I thought we could go with Schaefer, because he's used to, he's just out of Erie. So, I mean, he's just been doing on the OHL circuit. The one thing we should mention is those 8 guys, we needed them all. And we had to add Harley. We lost Theodore early,
right,
so he didn't play very much. How about Josh Morris? He shows up for the final game and had to go back to the hotel because he was sick. So if you're part of the 8, you're probably going to be part of the 6 at one time in a critical game in this tournament.
Well, and how much scoring are you expecting out of your blue line, Hitch?
Well, I think they made the decision that they want complete players here. I mean, you're still going to get guys like Makar are going to come through. Doughty's underrated on the power play. He's really a smart player. Theodore is really good. I think you've got enough there, but this looks like a 4-and-1. It looks like 1D and 4 forwards, because you got a lot of forwards that can do a lot of things, and they're in that flanker position on the power play, so they're going to be effective. So I think there's enough there. But when you look at that group of defensemen, this is a really big competitive group, and you're going to need that in the competition as it moves along.
Who's not on the team you thought would be, Chris?
Well, I was leading. Bennett and Schaefer kind of are the 2 guys that I looked at the closest and wondered if they weren't. I wasn't convinced he was going to be named, but I wondered about a guy like Zach Hyman. I want to hear what Hitch.
Yeah. If
Hitch gets his lab coat on and how you put together lines, because I thought Zach with Connor McDavid is such a good fit, although you got all kinds of weapons, and that's everybody's got their idea of what the best lines could be and how difficult it is to find the right guy for Sid or the right guy for Connor McDavid, and whether even I keep hearing lines that have Nathan McKinnon on the wing, which I cringe at. But I'm curious, Hitch, when you guys get in the lab and try and come up with the right combinations of what makes the most sense.
Chris, what we learned over time was that don't sit on chemistry. Like, we learned very early on that, you put a line together, you think it's going to be good, and then it doesn't look like it's working, and you stay with it, and it really ends up never working. One thing we learned for sure was, if it's not there right away, if your chemistry isn't there right away, move on quick. Like, who would have ever thought that the best winger for Sid was Bergeron? Nobody thought that. And it worked out great. I mean, they were together for two sets of Olympics, but it wasn't a line combination that anybody was even thinking about when we were preparing the 10 team. And to me, that's the key thing, is you can't, as a coach, if it's not there right away, you got to move on to a different selection. And I think that's really important, because it's amazing how certain guys click and certain guys don't. And some guys you think can play wing, and then when the pressure's on, they struggle. So you got to work on that stuff. But I know chemistry-wise, don't sit on it. If it's not there, change right away and get onto a different combination.
And yet chemistry is probably why Hagel and Cirelli are on this team.
Well, and trust, John. I think that's key as well. It was interesting to hear Doug Armstrong talk about we had our 12 guys or whatever, 21 players, and then we kind of went to John Cooper and talked to him, and you got to surmise that one of those players was going to be Anthony Cirelli. This is not an Anthony Cirelli-based story, but after the tournament, the Leafs were playing Tampa within a week or two of the Four Nations, and I had a chance to kind of debrief with Coop, and I asked him about one subtle change he made in the third period. As the game wore on, he went away from something and then back to it. And I without naming guys, I said, why did you do that? And he said, in the final 10 minutes, it came down to who I trust the most. And I think that's, well, I'm sure Hitch had, he had his short list of guys that he could trust, and on a team like this, that list is probably a lot longer. But at the end of the day, there's a certain number of players that at the key moments that trust is the key word.
Well, Ken, what's the story? Where does trust fit into all this?
What you find in these type of competitions, it brings out the best and the worst in people, and it brings out both. And you don't know that when the competition starts. You don't know what pressure is like. The pressure on Team Canada is high, really high, but it comes from all different angles. It's not just your family or your friends or whatever. It's the media, it's everything. And it's so important for the country that sometimes it overwhelms some players. So you've got to know that you got people that are going to be oblivious to that and just keep playing and don't worry about it. That's what impressed me so much about Doughty. Doughty came into the 10 team, and in critical times he was so calm and composed. It was super impressive, and I didn't know him that well, but you get guys like that you find out about it. And I can tell you right now, in big games, you've got Hagel, you've got Cirelli, you've got guys that come through every time for Coop. He's going to trust those guys all the time, and I think that you got to give the coach that, because he knows under pressure what players can do.
By the way, you mentioned media and playing in big situations. You talked about 2010. That was as big as it got. Chris was a big part of that as well. 17 million Canadians watched that game. 2002 in Salt Lake City, similar, North American. So we're going back to Italy, where, by the way, the last time Canada had no success in Torino. Is it a good thing or a bad thing from a pressure perspective to be in Europe, or does it make a difference?
I don't think it matters, to be honest with you. There's pressure anyways, and everything is scrutinized. You just got to get used to it and embrace it. And I think it's who can handle the living conditions, who can handle that life. Like there's a lot of dead time, John, away from the rink, and how you handle that dead time. And you see teams that, as the competition goes on, they just lose energy. They lose energy because the living part gets to be uncomfortable for a lot of the players, because there's so much dead time, and competition, or the area that you're involved in or where you live is a Spartan existence. So I think you got to know that you got people that can handle a little bit of adversity away from the rink, because the safe part is when you're at the rink. So to me, the teams that handle that and have a mature tone about them are going to be good. And I like the veteran players that are on this hockey club. They've been through this before. They know what's going on. They've prepared everybody already, I know. And they're not going to be surprised by what goes on away from the rink.
Well, how did you manage it in 2010? How did they manage the dead time there, or was it easier because it was Vancouver and lots of things to do?
Well, we ended up at the Athletes Village in our condo set up all the time, and so we befriended. It was interesting for me. In 2010, we befriended the short track speed skaters, and John, they kicked our ass at every competition, pool, ping pong, didn't matter. But the guys really got together with those guys, and so it became a group. And then in 2014, it was the curlers. By the way,
you didn't lose to the curlers, did you?
No, yeah, a lot.
Probably broke curfew with the curlers.
One thing I found out, curlers can really drink. Did you know that? And anyway, but we befriended them, and so it made it a much bigger group, and the guys really had a lot of fun with it. But we didn't feel isolated at all, and we had quiet, confident leaders. Like you love Sid as a player, but when you see him in these competitions and he's not at the rink, he's like glue for everybody else. And he's a really valuable player off the ice as much as he is on the ice. And so is Dowdy. And those guys really helped our group stay calm and focused and energized. And to me, you got to really have a group that embraces the Olympic spirit, because they're around athletes. You go into a mess hall and there's 700 or 800 people eating, and you've got to embrace that it's just a massive operation, and you've got to really embrace that and not be overwhelmed by it.
Ken talked about veteran players helping out, Chris, but we have a generation of NHL players that haven't been there.
Yeah, this is all new.
This is all new to Connor McDavid.
Yeah, which is another reason why Sidney Crosby and Drew Doughty are so important in all of this. Although I got the impression, and it's different, and Hitch has detailed why it's so much different at the Olympics, but it felt like Four Nations was a good dress rehearsal for a lot of this, and I have a question for Hitch, though, and I'm not trying to invent anything, but John will remember 1984 Team Canada was all Oilers and Islanders who hated each other, and now we've got guys from the Lightning and we've got guys from the Panthers and guys from the Oilers. Does Coop have to address anything to get everybody on the same page right away, or is that best just not even talked about?
I think you got to say something about it. I think you got to make sure, it doesn't have to be long, but are we good? Everybody good with this? Or we've got any existing issues? But I think if there's existing issues, that's where guys for me like Crosby step up and just quietly go about business and say, hey, we understand you guys have been at each other's throat, but we're together here and we don't have an issue, and making sure that those things happen. There's a very quiet group of leaders on this team already, 4 or 5 guys that will more than handle this. But I think you're going to find out that in a lot of cases that it gets dealt with very, very early in the competition, so that the group can come together. Like, for instance, John was talking about PK Subban. PK didn't play much, but he was really a key glue guy in the fun part of things, like where there was all the downtime. Like, you think about it, you're in the Athletes Village, and your game doesn't start until 9 p.m. and you're not pregame skating. You got all this dead time. Somebody's got to be the entertainer. Somebody's got to keep things loose. And PK did a great job on that. And he was a really important player in that part of it. And that's just a small thing. Like, nobody remembers the names of the players, but they remember what Team Canada did. And it was really important for PK to find a little bit of a role. And he found one that helped us a lot. And he kept things loose. The guys had a lot of fun with him. And I think you've got to have those guys on your hockey club, or people that are going to be willing to share, because There's going to be people that play 20 minutes a night that are going to play 8 minutes. And that's just the way it's going to be. And those guys got to embrace that role and keep it energized, or you're like I said, your energy is going to go down in a very low area as the competition goes on, because you're there. What are you there? 2.5 weeks?
Yeah,
that's a long time. That's a long time, and you got to make sure that you're energized for 2.5 weeks. That's quite a bit of downtime that you've got to kill.
Just to follow up on that, Brad Marchand is a guy that everybody loves to hate in the NHL, but it came pretty clear pretty quickly at Four Nations that he was one of those guys you're talking about, a guy that can disarm a room and give everybody a laugh, and even he could even take a run at Sid or McDavid and have everybody smile about it. So that's a role he seems to succeed at.
Well, it's one of those few times in his career, Chris, where Canadians actually like Brad Marchand, the hockey player.
No question.
When you think about what happened in Edmonton, what happened in Vancouver over the years, what happened in Toronto over the years, Brad Marchand's on the good side now. That's fascinating to think about. The one thing we haven't talked about is goaltending, and we will take a break and talk about goaltending on this edition of 100% Hockey, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and also available on YouTube. Back after this. Welcome back. One more segment with Chris Cuthbert and Ken Hitchcock on Canada's Olympic team. For no reason other than I don't think people are too surprised about it. We haven't really talked about goaltending yet, Chris. The three names surprise you at all?
No, not well. What did surprise me, I was interested in where we were going with the third guy. I think Logan Thompson has kind of in the last, since Four Nations and this year, has established himself as a guy that needed to be on this team. And then it seemed to be the two Colorado goaltenders and Darcy Kemper. And I'm curious if Hitch agrees that Kemper's Stanley Cup is the thing that put him over the top. And here's my sense that Jordan Binnington earned the starter's job for the first game of the Olympics in the last game of Four Nations. We knew in all likelihood he was going to go all the way in Four Nations. I'm not as convinced he's going the whole way in the Olympics. I guess if he's lights out from the start, why would they change? It just feels like we may need one of those other two guys before this is over.
Coach?
It's really interesting. In 2002, we start with Joseph and we end up with Brodeur.
Mm-hmm.
6, we flip and flop. 2010, we start with Brodeur and we end up with Luongo. And 2014, we get Carey Price, who was just lights out. To me, in a lot of these competitions, you need two guys, not one. And somebody's you're going to get stuck on maybe a short turnaround, or somebody isn't as good as you think you need to have, and you're going to have to make that change. So I think we're looking at two guys, not one. And that's going to emerge, I think, here now, and waiting and seeing where these guys are at from now until the start of the Olympics. Probably the starter will get dictated, but this is a trust issue. The coach trusts Binnington right now, and that's a big feather in Binner's cap right now, that he's got a coach that believes in him and trusts him. So I would say from that standpoint, he's got a leg up. I know he hasn't had as good a year as he normally has had, but he's a big time goalie, and he makes big saves at the right time. And he is a guy that can really turn a game around by making an unbelievable save that really elevates the bench. He's a great team person. And he's got the trust of the coach. So I would say Binner's got the leg up right now to start with. But you never know. You never know where this thing goes. Because, like I said, in a lot of these competitions, we started with one guy and then we had to flip.
Well, and let's remember, you talk about 2002. Let's also remember that was the one blemish on the whole event, and was the reaction of Curtis Joseph at the end of it, and the fact that he wasn't, it changed his whole perspective on playing for Pat Quinn again. And that was a problem. I mean, I still remember him sitting in the lobby that gold medal party you guys had after Salt Lake City, downtown Salt Lake, and Curtis wouldn't go in the room.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm on the other side with Pat, and Pat, when Pat made the call, he said, this is going to be a major issue, and I'll deal with it when I get back to Toronto. But right now, it's about Team Canada and what's important, and I've got to make this call. And I know it really bothered Pat a lot to have to make that call because he really believed in Curtis, but he just felt for Team Canada and for the country, he had to make a hard call. And that's what people don't understand is you got to make some of these calls that are really difficult because they have ramifications for years when you make the decision what you're going to do here. You know, the Gretzky not in the shootout or the changing of goaltenders or whatever. And Pat had the courage to make that call. And he knew there was going to be backlash, and he was prepared for it.
Just to circle back to this team, it's kind of a reverse order for Logan Thompson because he wasn't on the last team because they were worried about maybe that kind of reaction.
Right.
But he's gone back and just done his business and earned a chance. And it'll be interesting to see how he reacts if he doesn't get a chance, and more likely how he reacts with the opportunity. And I don't know enough about his mindset to know if that chip is on his shoulder and it's going to be a positive chip or not.
You know, John, one thing in 2002, we had Brodeur, we had Joseph. Do you remember who the third goalie was?
Eddie Balfour.
Yeah, and he's a guy watching this, and this is a guy that's, he's won a cup. He's been in the conference finals. He's been in the cup finals twice. We went on that 5 or 6 year window run. Mm-hmm. He just sat quietly and said, whatever the team needs. And he was even participating as a forward with his goal pads on in that was net front for traffic. And he would do anything for Team Canada. And I really had a great admiration for what Eddie did for us because he could have got into the whole mess that was starting to be created. And he just moved away and said, whatever the country needs, I'm ready for it. And you need that unselfishness if you expect to win at the end here.
See, I'm with Chris. I think Jordan Binnington starts the first game. I mean, I think that's a given. But what if he plays spectacularly? Do you just stick with him until he doesn't? How do you manage that, particularly when you know the preliminary round? They're not going to really be challenged in the preliminary round. So do you play all three goalies? Do you give all three goalies a game and then make a decision? How do you do that, Ken?
I think more, and Chris would know this because I don't know the TV schedule. Is there a quick turnaround game, Chris, at all? Do you know?
I'd have to double check that. I should know that, and I don't. But I wonder if that matters. Do you think when in that chunk of 3 games you need to have at least 2 guys, whether it's back to back or not?
I think you need 2 guys. I really do. I think you need 2 guys. I think you gotta. I really believe that. I from the experience that you go with one guy and he's your guy and then he doesn't play well. You got to make a decision, and the hard decision. If you've gone early in the competition and you've played 2 guys, then you've got choices. It doesn't seem so desperate, but I like the fact that you got a couple of guys that get the start, and then you make the decision as it gets into the sudden death competitions.
So will they know who the second choice is before they get to Italy? Or, I mean, it's just such a short lead up that it's hard for a goaltender to prove himself, isn't it?
Yeah, I think right now the evaluation is going to take place from now over the next 30 days. I think they're going to look at these guys over the next 30 days and see who's playing well. And I think the guy that's playing the best over the next 30 days is going to get to play. You know, the one thing Binner's got going, he's got the trust of the coach, but he's got to play well. And I think whoever's playing the best is probably going to be the guy that starts in goal.
Is that what happened in 2010? Because it's funny, you had the role that Pete DeBoer had the role this year, because Pete wasn't working in the league at the time. You weren't working in the league at the time, so you were able to scout more and travel more and watch games. Would you, in watching the games, would you take time, particularly the goaltenders, and try to network with them and contact them and say, hey, listen, here's what we're thinking? Or would that have occurred at that point, or does that occur now, between now and games time?
On that situation with Brodeur and Luongo was playing lights out leading into it, like absolutely lights out. So we knew how good he was playing. And then we felt, you know, if there's a blink, we got to move. And who do we move to? If it wasn't Marty, where would we move? And we made the decision that it was going to be Luongo.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and your third goalie was Marc-Andre Fleury, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the decision was in the coach's mind that this is the direction we were going to go if we were going to make a change. But we didn't know that we were going to make a change. We weren't ready to do that. But when it, for us, looked like we had to, then we had already made the choice that we were going with Luongo.
And would those goaltenders have known those decisions?
No, we didn't. We didn't want any. We kept that to ourselves. It was really like, you talk about pressure. We walked to the rink every day for games and practices. The slogan that stayed in my head for 20 years is "You better win."
And just to follow up, you guys made the right call. I mean, I chatted with Ron Wilson about a month after the big game, and he believed that Joe Pavelski had fired the game-winning puck past Luongo, and he said if Luongo tries to raise his glove hand, it's in. Somehow Luongo just was able to shrug a shoulder and get, and he said we were in line from our bench in the shooting line, and he said we were sure it was in. And Roberto Luongo won that, shortly thereafter Crosby scores, and thinking about Binnington and how many big saves he makes right before Connor McDavid's goal at Four Nations. It's so critical to make the right call and goal.
Well, I tell you what, it's rather interesting today how much more excited I think people are now for the Olympics, now that we have a tangible roster. And now the discussion between January 1st and that first week of February, we'll be talking about line combinations. Defensive pairs are done, though, Ken, don't you think?
Yeah, I think pretty much. The line combinations, that's why they've got a lot of pages in a binder, because they're going to get. And I know you started, you got this plan, and then all of a sudden doesn't look like it's going. And that's the one piece of advice is if someone asks me what to do, is I said, don't sit on it. If it ain't there, move quick, because if it's not there early, it doesn't seem to show up later. So if it's not there, start searching right away for another combination you get to see what works. You know, like, who would have ever thought at the end of the how important Ryan Getzlaf's line was? We had them as a fourth line, mm-hmm. and how important they were at the end. You know, they moved up the ladder to where they were the go-to group, and nobody thought that was going to happen. We thought, okay, they're going to give us, maybe 10 minutes a night, but they ended up playing a lot, and they were really valuable for us.
I got my game sheet in front of me, Hitch. I got them in the championship game listed as the second line: Nash, Getzlaf, Perry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Marlowe, Thornton, Heatley, Morrow, Jonathan Taves, Mike Richards, and Stahl, Crosby, and Iginla.
And you know what? Getzlaf and that line was just, they could shut down anybody, and they created scoring chances. When they played, you never got out of your own end, and they built us so much momentum every shift. It was unbelievable how good they were.
How many centers were on that team? I mean, it looks like there are about 8 centers.
We had a lot.
Yeah, I've got at least 6 here.
Yeah, and again, that's when you look at a guy like Bo Horvat, as you talked about, Ken. He can play center, he can play the wing if he has to, and versatility is important.
It's critical because matchups are like, the Euros don't care about the matchups as much as we do, but there's going to be games where matchups are going to be critical, and I really like the guys that Army's picked here, that his group has picked, because these are multi-dimensional players that are really competitive, and their go-to guys are in their own team, and they play all the big minutes, so they're used to the pressure.
Let's put you on the spot, though. Hitch, you watch more hockey than anybody, and there's not many guys you've ever watched that are better than Connor McDavid. Who would you, if he was on the Sherwood Park chain gang, who would you want with him?
Well, that's interesting. Like, to me, I'd like to see Celebrini play with him to start with. I don't know if he can handle the minutes, but I'd like to see him start with it, because you've got both guys can score, but both guys are super creative, and they can make plays at top speed. So to me, it's more twosomes than it is threesomes, Chris. Mm-hmm. But I really I'd like that young guy to get a chance to see what he can do up at that level. And he looks like an awesome player in the league right now. Now, that's a whole other level when you get there. But I'd like to see him get a go at it to start with.
Now, speaking of twosomes, does that mean you'd want to try McKinnon and Crosby together?
Oh, for sure.
Oh, so that means McKinnon's playing the wing, Chris. Because Sid's not playing the wing. Yeah. Sid's not playing the wing. Interesting. The one guy that has it's funny how the world shifts. If Mitch Marner was still playing in Toronto, there'd be tons of conversation about Mitch Marner. He's out of eyesight a lot. He's in Vegas. He's having a good season. Mm-hmm. He's having a very good season. But Mitch Marner's kind of the silent superstar now on this club, and played a big factor in Four Nations, didn't he?
Oh, he's really a good combination with Connor. They fit really well together, and like I said, if you get another creative player in there, they might be doing so much damage off the rush, because you got 3 rush attack players that are incredible, that they don't give the puck away. They don't make whole 4 plays. They don't give it away, and I would be really interested to see if Celebrini could keep up with Mitch and Connor.
Well, it wouldn't be a bad idea. What a great challenge to try to put together a group of 12 forwards with this selection of 14 guys. And then again, I think there's always been tons of concern, and you touched on it, Ken, is how you manage the guys that aren't playing. Because that has been a historic thing in our hockey world all the way back to 72. When guys aren't playing, they go home. Well, and everybody's got to buy in, right?
Exactly, and I think that's why they made the choices they did. I know that they've had conversations about that. You got to make sure that they don't take away from the group. You know, you're not going to get what you want. You're not going to get the ice time you want. You might not get to play as much as you want. You might not even get a chance to play. But that's the sacrifice you make for our country. And to me, you got to know that going in, because I can tell you, I've been on both ends of it. And when those guys are moody and sour, they take away the energy from the group. And then you can just see the energy as the tournament goes on. It drops significantly. And if they're unselfish and they're in it for all the right reasons, they add to the group. And so to me, it's really important to make sure that these players are on board with, hey, if you don't get what you want, what's your thoughts on this? And they've got to make a commitment that they're going to be part of this, whether they get what they want or whether they don't get what they want.
These guys have all been pretty well test driven one way or another, though, and they know what's going on. I know John mentioned 72, and I don't know if people realize Sursevar didn't lose a game in that series. And I guess 50 years after, I said, Serge, did they not figure it out that you should have been in every game? And he smiled and he said, they promised that every guy that they named, and there was, I think, over 30, wasn't there, John?
Yeah.
But they promised that every guy would play, and that was a promise they couldn't keep, or it was a promise that was a problem afterwards. I'm sure that's something they never promise anybody anymore.
Well, and right, that roster was too darn big. That was just the problem. Boys, this has been a treat. Thank you very much for your time. It's a great way to finish the calendar year. Happy New Year to both of you. Thanks for participating, and we're looking forward to everything that happens in Italy. And Chris, we'll look forward to your call.
Thanks, John. Happy New Year to you. Always great chatting with you. And I got to tell you, there's nobody better to talk hockey with than Ken Hitchcock. So Happy New Year, Hitch.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Same to you guys.
Cheers.
Ken Hitchcock, Chris Cuthbert. I'm John Shannon. I'll be back after this on 100% Hockey.
With the NHL app, you can listen to every NHL game right from your phone. And with home and away broadcast feeds, you choose your way to listen.
And he scores!
Whether you're at work, at the gym, or stuck in traffic, the NHL app puts you right in the action all season long. Every team, every game, everywhere you go. Download the NHL app and never miss a moment.
So Canada's Olympic team on the men's side has been named. I'm sure there'll be tons of discussion. I'm sure there's a few disappointed players around the National Hockey League. You have to wonder about a guy like Mark Scheifele. We touched on Evan Bouchard, Zach Hyman on that list as well. Wyatt Johnston was a guy I thought had a chance to play on this hockey club. But it's hard to argue with the 14 forwards, 8 defensemen that they picked, and obviously the 3 goaltenders. Special thanks to Chris Cuthbert and the coach, Ken Hitchcock, for their contributions. On Friday, the American Olympic team will be named on NBC's Today Show, 8 Eastern Time, in the 8 a.m. hour on the Today Show. NBC is the rights holder for the Olympics. It's not one of the regular NHL rights holders, ESPN or TNT. So they will announce the Olympic team, and we will discuss that team on Friday with a pair of mics. Mike Harrington, Mike Zeisberger, and Mike Millard. No, Darren will be back on Friday to contribute. For 100% Hockey and producer Hugh McClarty, I'm John Shannon. Happy New Year, everyone.